I'm Jerrom from the Environment Agency. I'm a fisheries specialist on the Great Ouse catchment, so I cover the whole of the Great Ouse, and I feel very lucky to have the Fens in that catchment. I'm a local lad. My family live in Wistow, which is only a couple of miles away, so I'm right in the centre of the Fens. And as an angler, I've spent a lot of time in the Fens, so it's very important for me to get involved with the fisheries in the Fens. I'm the fish lead on the Great Ouse catchment, and for people that do my job in other areas of the country, in Scotland perhaps, or in Wales, you can perhaps think of a guy going out and counting salmon or trout, looking at big boulder waterfalls. I don't really get to do that. In the Fens, most of my water flows uphill. The only fish I get to count are sometimes dead ones in the summer when the water levels are low or the water quality is poor. It's a very different story. My job is very different to what it could be, but it's actually a really good job, and it's a really good catchment. And we've still got a diverse fishery, but it's very different, and the way the land has been managed is now very different. So at the moment, the land has been drained. We've heard all about that. We've got very straight channels. The water probably hardly moves throughout the year except when it's in flood, and then it all moves. That's a bit of a problem for fish because they spend their life not having to swim very much, and then they spend some days of their life having to swim a lot and very fast. That water, it's either stored in the system or it moves down through pumping stations. When they move through a pumping station, they can't move back up, so it's very difficult. I have to deal with fish that are moved out of the system, completely out of the system. They'll go out to the sea, they can't come back, so I have to deal with that. We've got some important species as well, some species that have done really well in the Fens. We've got a very small spined loach, which even as an angler people would never see. It's locally very abundant in the Fens. The Fens are perfect for the spined loach, but in Europe it's a rare species and it's protected. Anglers come a long way to fish the Fens. They come from Europe, they come from all over the country, and in fact you'll be amazed to know that we've got the Ladies World Championships next year in the Fens. So it's a real, that just shows the sort of class of the fishery that we've got here. My job is to encourage that fishery, is to make it better, more productive. It's important. Fishing is important to the Fens. We have perhaps 50,000 anglers in the Fens. We have a lot more anglers than that visit the Fens, which produces a huge amount of money for tourism. So if the fishery and the Fens for fish isn't providing what that needs, then that's impacted. So it's a very important part of my job to keep the Fens a viable fishery. Another important species though that we perhaps don't give enough effort to, although my job is now becoming a lot more impacted by the species, are eels. The Fens would have been, there would have been huge amounts of the economy based on eels. And that's when, if you think about it, the Fens was a huge expanse of water, and what happened when that was all drained, that amount of water was concentrated into smaller channels, which meant that the carrying capacity for the land for eels was a lot smaller. So you imagine an eel now, it might spend 10, 20 years in the Fens. If it struggles its way through a couple of pumping stations and the 2,000 miles it's got to swim to the Sargasso Sea to spawn, those larvae that then have to float back another 2,000 miles have only got the Fens to come to, whereas in the past they had a huge wetland. So actually it's really important that we make the most of that species, and that species is not necessarily so important now. We lost our last Fenland eel catcher last year. We don't have a Fenland eel fisherman in the Fens anymore, which is real sad considering it was a huge part of the economy for the Fens. So we need to encourage the eel back, and we need to do all that we can. And my job, a big part of my job, is to do that, working with landowners, water users, and just encourage the Fens to be good for fisheries, but mainly for eels. After all, it's not economies locally that are now reliant on that. Eels are protected to protect the fishery, actually, the economies of other countries, other towns, villages in the rest of Europe, Spain for example. So it's really important that we do our bit here to protect water, to protect the very little bit of perfect eel habitat that we've now left with, to encourage the populations of the future. So hopefully, if we do our job right, we'll be helping to open up the fens back to eels and fish. There won't be the barriers in the way, there won't be the pumping stations that only pump one way. And hopefully that in turn will then create better habitats, better environments for wildlife generally, and have a wider impact from just this small little area of England.